We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Nations rich and poor must invest now to protect against the effects of climate change or pay an even heavier price later, according to a global commission.
Under the basic law, special administrative
Hong Kong's embattled leader warned the United States on Tuesday not to interfere with her government's response to the city's pro-democracy movement after fresh protests called on Washington to ramp up pressure on Beijing.
North Korea fired projectiles into the sea, according to the South Korea's military, hours after Pyongyang said it was willing to hold working level talks this month with the United States.
Beleaguered British Prime Minister Boris Johnson vows to continue with his attempts to strike a new Brexit deal with Brussels after losing yet another vote in a chaotic session of Parliament.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. President Donald Trump said that the U.S. would have to be careful about allowing Bahamian survivors of Hurricane Dorian into their country. He warned there could be very bad people among them. Republican and Democratic legislators have asked the White House to clarify its policy as tens of thousands of people board ships and planes bound for the U.S. Hurricane Dorian devastated the Bahamas last week, ravaging the island nation for over 40 hours with record Category 5 winds. The previous day, several hundred storm survivors were prevented from boarding a ferry from the Bahamas to Florida because they lacked U.S. visas, an incident that a top American immigration official said was a mistake.
They just got a call from CBP, and CBP told them that everyone that doesn't have a U.S. visa and who's traveling on police record has to come off. At the last minute like this, it's kind of disappointing. It's hurtful because watching my daughters cry.
Thank you.
You take care of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Speaking to reporters outside the White House, the president, who has made strict immigration regulations a pillar of his presidency, said that everyone needs totally proper documentation.
Thank you. So we're also recovering from a hurricane, but we have to be very careful. Everybody needs totally proper documentation because the Bahamas had some tremendous problems with people going to the Bahamas that weren't supposed to be there. I don't want to allow people that weren't supposed to be in the Bahamas to come into the United States, including some very bad people and some very bad gang members and some very, very bad drug dealers.
Meanwhile, Mark Morgan, the acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, said the ferry incident was a mistake and the result of some confusion.
If your life is in jeopardy, you're in the Bahamas, and you want to get to the United States, you're going to be allowed to come to the United States, right? Whether you have travel documents or not. We've already allowed U.S. citizen and non-U.S. citizen. We've already processed people that have travel documents and don't have travel documents. But I want to be very clear, though, because I've already seen some false narrative out there, is that doesn't mean that we do this with a blind eye. We still have to balance the humanitarian need and assistance of those that need it versus the safety of this country.
Meanwhile, the authorities in the Bahamas have updated the death toll from Hurricane Dorian to 45, 1 week after the storm battered the archipelago. Police are also calling for the public to register details of the many people still missing.
There is an urgent need for critical life-saving supplies, says a UN representative in Bahamas, after Hurricane Dorian left hundreds of houses destroyed. The U.S. World Food Program was sending food and supplies. A WFP team estimated that 90% of buildings in Marsh Harbor were damaged. Watch this.
The physical destruction is massive. It's encouraging, however, to see the way that some people, residents, are finding quick solutions to respond to the situation themselves, but they need support. There is an urgent need for critical life-saving supplies, food, water, sanitary hygiene packs. The UN has deployed emergency medical teams in government infrastructure to meet trauma needs and respond urgently to people.
Meanwhile, a powerful typhoon that battered Tokyo overnight with record winds has already killed 3 people as canceled trains caused commuter chaos and more than 100 flights were scrapped. It left thousands stranded at the airport and transit points. Here's Dennis Liu for the report.
One of the strongest typhoons that hit Japan Kanto region left 3 dead, 1 missing and over 50 injured. According to police reports, an 87-year-old man died after a tree toppled on him as he was removing fallen trees on a mountain in Otaki, Chiba Prefecture, east of Tokyo. Another report also mentioned a woman in her 50s died after being blown off her feet and into a wall in the capital Setagaya ward in eastern Tokyo. A 47-year-old man in Kanagawa Prefecture, south of Tokyo, was also reported dead after falling off from a height. The police said the civilian was fixing a power generator at the Maritime Self-Defense Force in Yokosuka Base. A woman in her 20s suffered serious injuries when a tall fence of a golf driving range collapsed onto residences in Ichihara, Chiba. 17-year-old boy went missing at a beach in the same prefecture. About 14,000 people were stranded at Narita Airport on Monday night as the public transportation system connecting the airport and metropolitan area was suspended, the Narita International Airport Corporation said. Airport officials provided travelers with blankets, sleeping bags, and crackers. The airport extended operations by 2 hours, until 1 a.m. on Tuesday. Some Japan Airlines international flights from Guam and Manila were moved to Haneda Airport due to congestion at Narita. Up to 209 kilometers per hour were reported on Kozui Island in Izu, 207 kilometers per hour in Chiba, and 156 kilometers per hour at Haneda Airport, all breaking records according to the Japan Meteorological Agency. Reporting from Western Tokyo in Japan, this is Dennis Liu for Eagle News International, and I am 1 with 25.
Australia battled to contain more than 100 bushfires in the east of the country. Authorities warned that massive bushfires across eastern Australia could be blazing for weeks. Firefighters launched, I quote, Herculean efforts to save homes from destruction. Our EBC correspondent Amy Kapili Taroha reports from Australia.
There has been an ongoing massive bushfire incident in the state of Queensland as well as in the areas of New South Wales that started last Sunday. In the press briefing that has been made by the acting Premier Jackie Trad, the Treasurer of the Ministry for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Partnerships. This morning, she emphasized that the community should listen to the only sources of truth, hereby the authorities, Queensland Police and Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. A lot of areas or communities are affected, mainly in southeast Queensland, including Sunshine Coast, and in the town called Perigian, around 400 people were already evacuated to their respective evacuation centers. The acting premier also mentioned that there has been more than 80 fires in the state and is being aggravated by the windy and high humidity weather conditions that is being felt all throughout the state at the moment. As of last night, more than 300 deployed firefighters are on the ground battling this crisis situation. Thereby, only little or reduced fatalities has been reported as they continue to battle the ember storm engulfing the communities of the bushfire areas. The Bureau of Meteorology also mentioned that there will be tricky weather conditions in the next few days. We will be expecting higher temperature at the end of the week with dry winds picking up midweek, but will also hopefully decrease at the end of the week. However, smoke in the areas, especially in southeast Queensland, will still be evident for the rest of the week. Fire danger rates are hopefully expected to reduce because of thorough planning and preparations. These have helped them during their preemptive actions. The fire is still not over at the moment, and continuous assessments of the fire situations are being done. Around 300 assessments from the different fire locations have already been done, and so far 17 houses were fully damaged across Queensland. In total, for both full and partial damages, around 84 houses were accounted for. The numbers will truly change as the day goes on, so we are also monitoring the updates from the different various government agencies. The Queensland Police also created a task force, namely Task Force Overcross, to investigate the current fire conditions. Their initial assessments include, unfortunately, children playing with fire that has costed the damaged properties brought about by the bushfires. They have been urging also the parents to talk to their children about the safety of fire hazards so as to avoid such massive events like this in the future. Initial assessments also include some purposeful and reckless actions that has led to these massive bushfires in the state. Again, from the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, last night around 1,000 volunteers and firefighters have been involved already in the crisis. This has been very intense and trying circumstances, and the government is applauding all the volunteers and firefighters for their Herculean effort to save lives in this massive bushfire event. As this is a developing story, more stories and details will be shared to you later as we deliver news from the Eagle News Australia Bureau. Reporting from Brisbane, Australia, this is Emmy Capilita Roja, and I am one with 25.
Thank you, Emmy. Meanwhile, huge fires are also raging across vast swaths of Indonesia's rainforests, some of the world's biggest, with toxic smog shutting hundreds of schools in Southeast Asia. Massive jungle areas in Sumatra and Borneo Islands are ablaze as thousands of personnel battle to quell the fires, frequently started to clear land for crop plantations. Burning forests to make way for farming is also thought to be behind the enormous fires currently ripping through the Amazon in South America, and experts believe they could have a serious impact on the global climate. In Indonesia, meanwhile, the number of hotspots, areas at risk of fires, has soared in parts, including on Borneo, which the country shares with Malaysia and Brunei. Air quality has dropped to unhealthy levels in and around Kuala Lumpur, according to the government's air pollutant index, and the skyline has been shrouded in thick smog. Haze also hung over Singapore, while residents in parts of southern Thailand were advised to wear face masks this week. Around 400 schools were closed Tuesday in 9 districts of Malaysia's Sarawak state on Borneo, with more than 150,000 students affected, according to the local education department. In neighboring Indonesia's Jambi province on Sumatra, some kindergartens will be closed until Friday, while elementary and junior high schools are also temporarily shut, according to local authorities who didn't give exact numbers.
Nations rich and poor must invest now to protect against the effects of climate change or pay an even heavier price later. A global commission warned Tuesday spending $1.8 trillion across 5 key areas over the next decade would not only help buffer the worst impacts of global warming, but could generate more than $7 trillion in net benefits, the report from the Global Commission on Adaptation argued.
We are the last generation that can change the course of climate change. And we are the first generation that has to live with these consequences. Adaptation can save lives, protect our homes and communities, and safeguard and build a better future for us all. We have a phrase at the Global Commission on Adaptation: delay and pay, or plan and prosper.
The report said investing now in early warning systems, climate-resistant infrastructure, mangrove protection, better agriculture, and improving fresh water resources would pay for itself several times over. Mangroves, tropical tidal water forests, protect, for example, against storm surges and act as nurseries for commercial fisheries, but at least a third of them globally have been uprooted for tourism or aquaculture. The report stated global actions to slow climate change are promising but insufficient. We must invest in a massive effort to adapt to conditions that are now inevitable. The report also said that without action, by 2030, climate change could push more than 100 million people in developing countries below the poverty line. Failure to curb the greenhouse gas emissions, slow roasting the planet, has already unleashed a crescendo of deadly heat waves, water shortages, and superstorms made more destructive by rising seas. The Bahamas was devastated this month by one of the strongest Atlantic storms on record. Earth's average surface temperature has gone up 1 degree since the late 19th century and is on track at current rates of CO2 emissions to warm another 2 or 3 degrees by the century's end. The 2015 Paris Agreement calls for capping global warming at well below 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees if possible. But it was given a hit when U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the pact in 2017.
I sincerely hope that President Trump will return to Paris Climate Agreement and do something good for humanity.
It would be really good to have the opportunity to give you the opportunity.
Meanwhile, UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet has issued a stark warning that climate change poses a rapidly growing global threat to human rights. Bachelet spoke at the opening of the 42nd session of the UN Human Rights Council. Take a look.
Climate change is a reality that now affects every region of the world. The human implications of currently projected levels of global heating are catastrophic. Storms are rising and tides could submerge entire island nations and coastal cities. Fires rage through our forests and the ice is melting. We're burning up our future, literally. WHO expects climate change to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year between 2030 and 2050. The world has never seen a threat to human rights of this scope. This is not a situation where any country, any institution, any policymaker can stand on the sidelines. The economies of all nations, the institutional, political, social and cultural fabric of every state, and the right of all your people and future generations will be impacted. The window of opportunity for action may be closing, but there is still time to act. With sufficient determination, acting in partnership, we can take steps to advance human rights and fundamental freedoms, and in doing so, we will strengthen our societies and build a better future for us all.
Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
Tungkulin ng MTRCV ang mag-provide na
Net25 is now available on OSN, the largest entertainment network in the Middle East and North Africa.
Watch your favorite Net25 shows on OSN Channel 725, same day as the Philippines.
Net25 shows live and on demand, anytime, anywhere on any mobile device on OSN Play.
Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam warned the U.S. not to meddle with her administration's response to mass civil disobedience. Millions of people have demonstrated over the last 14 weeks in the biggest challenge to China's rule of the financial hub since its handover from Britain in 1997. Protesters took to the streets again on Sunday, marching to the American consulate to call on Congress to pass a bill expressing support for the pro-democracy movement. The proposed law could undermine Hong Kong's special U.S. trade privileges by mandating regular checks on whether authorities were respecting the basic law that underpins the city's semi-autonomous state. But Hong Kong's pro-Beijing chief executive Carrie Lam said that any change to its economic relationship with Washington would threaten mutual benefits.
Under the Basic Law, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region does enjoy a high degree of autonomy in conducting our external affairs. But those external affairs certainly will be of mutual benefits to both parties. So when we sign a free trade agreement, when we have comprehensive avoidance of double taxation, those were done in that proper context to bring mutual benefits to both parties. Similarly, any agreements that we have or any particular provisions apply to Hong Kong from the Americans, they are not exclusively for the benefit of Hong Kong. They are also mutual. But to interfere into Hong Kong's internal affairs in terms of what we are doing under the Basic Law, protection of freedoms and liberties, this is totally unnecessary because we ourselves have the obligation and the duty to comply with provisions in the Basic Law.
Lam also called on Hong Kongers to reject violence after another weekend of protests, the 14th in a row, with clashes between police and demonstrators throughout the city.
if you read my video statement, the offer of 4 actions, not just the formal withdrawal of the bill, is not directly to stop these protests or the violence. It is really to extend my sincerity to start a dialogue with the people. So, in our view, violence should be stopped for the benefit of Hong Kong. But going forward, to mend the rift in society and to bring back peace, then we are very willing to engage people directly in a dialogue. So that is our current position, and as I've said in my introductory remarks, we are gearing up to go into the community to have that dialogue directly with the people. But I make the further appeal here that the first priority, in order to achieve the objective of bringing peace and order to Hong Kong, is for all of us, all people of Hong Kong, to say no to violence.
What started as a pushback against a bill allowing extraditions to mainland China snowballed into wider calls for democracy and police accountability after the city's leaders in Beijing refused concessions. The movement is primarily youth-led, and many school children and students have joined what has been an unprecedented summer of political rage. Class boycotts have also been organized by some in schools and universities. Hong Kong's Education Bureau sent out official guidelines in late August saying authorities would be collecting the numbers of absent students and details on any teachers who participated in class boycotts.
I'd say for high school students, you might think that they might not be able to understand because these issues are so complicated, but that's not true. So they spend so much time trying to understand these concepts that are not easy to comprehend, but they understand it thoroughly. That's why they decided they have a stake. That's why they're out.
Meanwhile, Beijing slammed the meeting between Hong Kong activist Joshua Wong and German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas in Berlin, saying it was disrespectful of China's sovereignty. Take a look.
中方对德方允许香港分裂分子入境，并且从事反华分裂活动，以及德国外长马斯公然同这样的人接触，表示强烈不满和坚决反对。中方已经向德方提出严正交涉。 个别德国的媒体和政客企图借反华分裂分子蹭热度、博眼球、做政治秀的做法，也是极其错误的，是对中国主权的不尊重和对中国内政的干涉。
Joshua Wong, a prominent face in Hong Kong's growing pro-democracy protests, planned to hold talks with other German politicians during his visit to Berlin. But there are no plans for Chancellor Angela Merkel to meet him, according to her spokesman, Stephen Seibert, on Monday. Ahead of her 3-day visit to China, demonstrators in the semi-autonomous city appealed to the German Chancellor to support them in her meetings with China's leadership. Wong himself had written an open letter to Merkel seeking her backing.
North Korea on Tuesday fired projectiles into the sea. South Korea's military said hours after Pyongyang said it was willing to hold working-level talks this month with the United States. North Korea twice launched unidentified projectiles Tuesday morning in an easterly direction. The objects flew approximately 330 kilometers from the Kaichon area in South Pyongyang province, according to the South Korean military. No further details were immediately available, but it was the latest in a series of provocations. Previous launches have been identified as short-range missiles. President Trump and the North Korean leader had agreed to restart working-level dialogue during an impromptu meeting at the demilitarized zone dividing the nuclear-armed North and South Korea in June, but those talks have yet to begin. Kim and Trump adopted a vaguely worded statement on the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula at their first summit in Singapore in June last year, but little progress has since been made on dismantling Pyongyang's nuclear program. A report published by the United Nations panel of experts last week said North Korea's development of nuclear warheads has not stopped despite the moratorium it declared on nuclear blasts and long-range missile launches. U.S. officials have called North Korea's recent short-range missile launches provocations, although Trump himself has avoided criticizing them.
To the Netherlands now, 3 people were killed and 1 seriously injured in a shooting in the Dutch city of Dordrecht on Monday. Police officers and emergency services were filmed from the other side of the cordon. Dutch media have reported the incident as a family shooting involving 2 children. Local newspaper BN Destem reported that the other 2 victims were children aged 8 and 12, daughters of the suspect and the injured 4th victim. It said the couple were separating but still lived together. Now, this has not yet been officially confirmed. An investigation is, however, underway, according to a tweet from the Rotterdam police. Now, the mayor of Dordrecht, Wouter Kloff, was present on site. Let's listen in.
This evening here in the city of Dordrecht, 3 people killed, 1 very seriously injured. Police is investigating the exact situation. But I'm here now to talk to neighbors and children who noticed this. The impact, as you can imagine, is very bad. Yes. His neighborhood knows each other, children play together, and you can imagine this is very terrible for Dordrecht, especially for this area. These are the details I can tell you. Tomorrow we will come together with the attorney and the police, and then we will talk about the facts. Tomorrow there will be more information.
Going now to the Brexit crisis, British MPs rejected a second attempt by Prime Minister Boris Johnson to call an early election to break the Brexit deadlock in a final show of defiance before he controversially suspends Parliament. However, it has been a dramatic parliamentary session as Speaker John Bercow was due to lead MPs in a procession to the House of Lords to mark the suspension. A group of angry opposition backbenchers appeared to try to block his way. Take a look.
Mr. Speaker, the Lords, who are authorised by Her Majesty's Commission to declare her royal assent to acts passed by both houses and to also declare the prorogation of Parliament.
I'm perfectly happy, as I have advised others, to play my part, but I do want to make the point that this is not a standard or normal prorogation. It is. I don't require any assistance from you, Mr. Stevenson. You wouldn't have the foggiest idea where to start in seeking to counsel me on this important. I require no response from you. I require no response from you. I require no response from you, young man. I require no response from you.
Now, there were cries of shame on you when the House Speaker closed and went out of the chamber. Let's listen in.
Meanwhile, this government will press on with negotiating.
It was a tumultuous few days that exposed Prime Minister Johnson's weakness in the face of hostile lawmakers. The House of Commons again refused to grant a snap poll that might have bolstered his position. Addressing a rowdy chamber late into Monday night, the Prime Minister told MPs, "I will not ask for another delay."
Meanwhile, this government will press on with negotiating a deal. While preparing to leave without one. And I will go to that crucial summit in Brussels on October the 17th. And no matter how many devices this Parliament invents to tie my hands, I will strive, Mr. Speaker, to get an agreement in the national interest. This government will not delay Brexit any further. We will not allow the emphatic verdict of the referendum to be slowly suffocated by further calculated drift and paralysis. And while the opposition run from their duty to answer to those who put us here, they cannot hide forever. The moment will come. The moment will come when the people will finally get their chance to deliver their verdict, Mr. Speaker, on how faithfully this House executed their wishes. And I am determined that they will see that it was this government that was on their side.
The one thing the Prime Minister didn't say was that he was going to obey the law of this country. He did not say he acknowledged or accepted 3 votes that have taken place in this Parliament. And under his request, the House is now due, apparently, this evening to be prorogued for one of the longest prorogations in history, simply in order to avoid any questioning of what he is doing or not doing, simply to avoid discussion about Yellowhammer, particularly to avoid any discussion about the proposals he has or hasn't or do or don't exist that have been put to the European Union. Mr. Speaker, this government is a disgrace, and the way the Prime Minister operates is a disgrace.
Now, the turmoil deepened when House of Commons Speaker John Bercow announced that he will step down by October 31st at the latest, with a few shots aimed at the government in his speech.
Colleagues, I would like to make a personal statement to the House. At the 2017 election, I promised my wife and children that it would be my last. This is a pledge that I intend to keep. If the House votes tonight for an early general election, my tenure as Speaker and MP will end when this Parliament ends. If the House does not so vote, I have concluded that the least disruptive and most democratic course of action would be for me to stand down at the close of business on Thursday, October the 31st.
President Donald Trump on Monday said that U.S. peace talks with the Taliban are dead and that he is ramping the war back up after canceling secret talks with the Afghan insurgents at his weekend retreat.
They're dead. They're dead. As far as I'm concerned, they're dead. They thought that they had to kill people in order to put themselves in a little better negotiating position. When they did that, they killed 12 people. One happened to be a great American soldier, a wonderful young man from Puerto Rico.
Trump angrily denied that the whiplash effect of his sudden shifts on Afghanistan was causing turmoil. Until this weekend, there had been steadily mounting expectations of a deal that would see the United States draw down troop levels in Afghanistan. In return, the Taliban would offer security guarantees to keep extremist groups out. But then on Saturday, Trump revealed that he had canceled an unprecedented meeting between the Taliban and himself at storied Camp David. He said this was in retaliation for the killing of a U.S. soldier by the Taliban in huge Kabul bomb blast last week. The cancellation announced on Twitter was the first time most Americans learned that such a dramatic meeting was even planned. Many in Washington were shocked, and some were angry that the Taliban had been on the point of visiting the presidential retreat on the eve of the anniversary of the September 11 terrorist attacks. Trump repeated on Monday that he wanted to get out by the earliest possible time. However, whether because of last week's killing of a U.S. soldier, as he says, or due to wider misgivings, that goal now appears in tatters. We'll be back with more news right after this break. Stay tuned.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back. 8 agreements were signed between the Philippines and Singapore during the state visit of Singapore's first female president, Halima Yacob, to Manila on Monday. In his speech after his bilateral agreement with Yacob, President Duterte welcomed the signing of the 8 agreements in his speech. Let's listen in.
With the agreement signed today, we take the first of our eager steps toward the next half of century of our natural, mutual, reinforcing and beneficial partnership. With mutual trust, respect, and abiding amity, I am confident that we will achieve our shared goals and aspirations of our people.
And here are the following 8 agreements signed between the Philippines and Singapore. First, the Memorandum of Understanding between the Department of Education, or DepEd, and Temasek Foundation International and Nanyang Polytechnic International Program on Innovations and Teaching and Learning of STEM, or Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, with design thinking, which provides for long-term collaboration, cooperation, and capability development of DepEd officials and the principals of teachers of DepEd high schools in STEM education. Second is the MOU between the Department of Agriculture and Enterprise Singapore on agricultural cooperation and related activities. The MOU between Department of Trade and Industry of the Republic of the Philippines, the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, and Skills Future Singapore Agency of Singapore on cooperation on human capital development and rescaling and skills upgrading of workforce. MOU between the Development Bank of the Philippines and Infrastructure Asia Singapore on knowledge sharing to support infrastructure development. MOU between Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System and Public Utilities Board. The MOU between the National Commission for Culture and the Arts and Ministry of Culture, Community, and Youth of the Republic of Singapore on cultural cooperation. The MOU between Infrastructure Asia and Public-Private Partnership Center on assisting Philippine local implementation implementing agencies with the development or implementation of PPP projects. The MOU between the National Privacy Commission of the Republic of the Philippines and the Personal Data Protection Commission of the Republic of Singapore on cooperation in personal data protection. The President of Singapore, Yaacob, for her part, said that the deal signed spanned many salient areas of mutual interest, such as infrastructure development, sustainable urban solutions like water resource management, skills training, and education cooperation in preparation for the fourth industrial revolution, agri-trade, arts and culture, and data protection.
Singapore and the Philippines also enjoy close people-to-people ties. There are more than 200,000 Filipinos living, working, and studying in Singapore. I told President Duterte that we deeply appreciate the contributions of the Filipino community to Singapore's society and economy. Likewise, I am glad that we have a very vibrant Singaporean community in the Philippines. I will be meeting some of them later this week, many of whom are here for humanitarian and interfaith work. On Wednesday, we will also be having a dialogue with some...
Pork prices have been sent soaring and herds devastated as African swine fever tears through China's massive pig farming industry, forcing the country to ramp up imports to satisfy demand. But analysts warned worse is yet to come. More than 1.1 million pigs have been killed or culled so far as authorities scramble to contain a virus that has spread to neighboring countries since the first cases emerged in August 2018 and for which there is no vaccine. But the figure is widely believed to be much higher, as official data show China's pig herd totaled 347.6 million in the first half of the year, down 60 million from the same period last year. Pork prices soared by a fifth in June alone. The worst is yet to come, said Jean-Peter Van Ferney, who monitors foreign markets at the French Pork Institute. For now, it's the numbers that are falling. Then it will be production and consumption will fall, he said. To meet demand, Beijing has increased pork imports, with shipments from the European Union rising 37% between January and April, according to European Commission figures. Brazil has also become a big source of imports. China is only importing frozen pork, and the meat is going to larger cities, said Jean-Peter Van Ferney, who monitors foreign markets at the French Pork Institute. Prices, meanwhile, could go up as much as 40% in the next 6 months, according to a note by Nomura Bank. Swine fever does not affect humans, and butchers have been seeking to reassure consumers that their meat is safe in the country that produces and eats more pork than anywhere else in the world.
And meanwhile, Jack Ma steps aside on Tuesday as chairman of Alibaba, ending a spectacularly successful 20-year run during which the charismatic former English teacher's e-commerce company left a profound impact on China's economy. Ma, who turns 55 on Tuesday, hands the reins of the company he co-founded to a team of executives led by CEO Daniel Zhang. Ma intends to put his $41 billion fortune toward philanthropic projects such as education. Meanwhile, Apple was expected to introduce 3 upgraded iPhones and a successor to its more affordable iPhone XR as it looks to hold its share of the premium smartphone market, where prices are hovering around $1,000. But services, subscriptions, and online content will likely share the stage with the company's glitzy hardware as Apple seeks to shift its focus away from a smartphone market which is showing little growth. Creative strategies analyst Carolina Milanesi said, quote, "I think it's going to be the first year the event is going to be also about services. We might get to see what Apple looks like as a company when they're talking about services and hardware as one product." Richard Windsor of research firm Radio Free Mobile said Apple is coasting on the iPhone because of its strong quality, but it's not likely to see strong growth from either hardware or services. Apple recently released a smartphone generation credit card in the US and is keen to launch its TV Plus streaming service before Disney goes live with a rival service in November. They unveiled streaming video plans along with news and game subscription offerings as part of an effort to shift its focus to digital content and services to break free of its reliance on iPhone sales. The company also plans to launch a new game subscription service called Apple Arcade by the end of this year.
The lander module from India's moon mission has been located on the lunar surface. India's space scientists were desperately trying Tuesday to establish communication with their broken moon lander, having located the probe that went silent moments before it was due to make a historic soft landing. The landing, called Vikram, after the founder of India's space program, was due to touch down on the moon in the early hours of Saturday, but contact was lost around 2.1 kilometers above the surface. Indian media reports have said that the lander suffered a hard landing, possibly damaging it and the rover inside. The Press Trust of India news agency, or PTI, reported on Monday that the lander was unbroken but was lying tilted on the lunar surface and that the chances of restoring communication were low. India is also preparing Gaganyaan, its first manned space mission, and wants to land a probe on Mars.
Days after clinching the top prize at the Venice Film Festival and garnering much Oscar buzz, the film Joker is presented for the first time in North America at the Toronto International Film Fest. Let's take a look.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This is only the second time, so I'm still nervous. Still, even though I'm so great over there, it was a trip just to be there in competition, and then to have it win the Golden Lion was quite unexpected. Honestly, we just can't believe about the Venice thing, and we're just coming off that. This is literally the second time we're showing the movie ever, so we're just still getting our footing. So they want us to.
What was it like watching it?
I mean,
very intriguing.
Yeah, you said it's 8 minutes standing ovation for the film at the Venice. Yeah, that's good. So that.
Gotta watch this.
Yes.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards on Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.